Floyd was killed by Derek Chauvin, the police officer in Minneapolis. And there were protests that broke out in cities around the world, and especially cities around the United States. And some of those protests turned violent. And there was riotous behavior and assaults on police officers, and there was arson and looting, and there was general disorder. And it's a big political football, and people are on all sides of it, and they're defenders of it, and so forth and so on. But it occurred to me that I did not even know that the incident that happened with a white police officer and the black gentleman who died, who was killed, was a racial incident. I say I did not know that it was a racial incident. All I knew was that the police officer was white and that the man who was killed was black. It didn't follow from that that it was a racial incident. We were making it into a racial incident. We being all of us here in the United States, we were making it into a reenactment of old American dramas of lynching and the murder of black people by rogue police and so forth and so on. We took that thing and we said, yes, see, here we have proof of the knee on the neck of Black America. That's what Al Sharpton, the activist, said at the funeral of George Floyd. He said, America has its knee on our neck. And I thought,
they only needed one thing.
This great country of 330 million people,
one
with
incident
40
to
million
provide
black people.
The fact that, see,
and here we are, 150 years after slavery and a half century since Martin Luther King was killed. Really? That's going to be the narrative for our country's politics for the next decade, for the next 15 years. This is what we're going to teach to our children. This is how we're going to arrange our media coverage of these events. That's a disaster for this country.
Okay, so how can you say that when you also have spoken so eloquently on topics such as the differential incarceration rate? This is not an assault on your statement, by the way. I'm very curious because obviously, you've spoken profoundly about the danger of that differential incarceration rate. And you can see that it's not that easy to conceptually disentangle, especially if you're politically motivated. But even if you're not, an event like that from that broader narrative that something, something's not right structurally, and perhaps this is a reflection of it. But, well, so I don't know how to reconcile those two viewpoints. I don't know how you reconcile them.
With difficulty, I suppose I could say, because they do point in slightly different, maybe even more than slightly different directions, but I'm trying.
It's a hard pill to swallow. That's why. It's a very hard pill to swallow. Maybe the reason could be that you have to think about these people, they might be right all along. All these people might be wrong all along. But there's not a middle ground here. When you start digging on these things, there's not a middle ground here. It's like when you go to the truth, it's the truth. And the truth's the ugliest thing ever. It feels, you get the truth, painful, bitter, something that you cannot conceptualize in the moment. You go to bed, next day you feel like something else. You feel bigger. You feel, reborn again. And maybe that pillow's too big and you might take you a little bit of time to swallow. So that might be a little bit more longer time. But in the end,
trying to keep my
you become a better person by knowing.
I do think that the advent of what they call mass incarceration, 2.25 million people under lock and key on a given day, half of them, or 45% of them, being black people when we're 12% of the population, as a way of doing business going forward without any sense of urgency of reform, without any revisiting of our drug laws or our sentencing or whatever, without any attention to what is supposed to happen when someone is in prison, rehabilitation and whatnot, without any exploration of alternatives to incarceration as ways of responding to criminal offending, is bad for our country. I do believe that. And I believe the racial aspect of that echoes with our history in ways that are dangerous and that we dare not neglect. I'm the same guy. On the other hand, I think if you racialize the discussion of crime and punishment, there was the woman who was murdered at Columbia University a few years ago, and her she was killed by these kids who were just trying to rob her, and they ended up stabbing her to death.
Oh my God.
She was white. She was, you know, I'm sorry, I don't remember her name offhand.
Damn, what do you do there?
But, you know, she was a lovely young woman, and innocent is how she's going to appear in the photograph.
Very common in New York.
She certainly did nothing to
For
deserve
those that live in Williamsburg, Bushwick, you know what I'm talking about. If you're close to Brownsville, you just leave it like that.
what befell her, and she was white.
Mm-hmm,
The kids
right.
who
So that's
killed
the other side of it. Yeah, right.
Tessa something is her last name, I can't recall. The kids who killed her were Black kids from around Harlem. They were in the park.
Yeah,
They were looking
yeah, I
for a quick
remember.
score. They had a knife. The woman is lying, she bleeds out. Now they've convicted. One of them has been convicted. And I'm looking at the photo in the newspaper, and here's this Black kid. He looks like a Black kid who's 16, 18 years old. He's a kid. And he's from this impoverished neighborhood, and he's Black. And the woman is white. I don't want that incident processed in terms of Black kid murders white woman in the park.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe it's an issue. Maybe it's an issue of conflation, careless conflation of levels of analysis, hey? Because you're talking about a high resolution analysis of structural problems in the penal system, and to put that George Floyd event, to cram that into the same narrative, is sort of bespeaks of undifferentiated thought. And then you point out that the danger of that is, well, if you're going to racialize the white cop against the black victim of the homicide, well, then why can't the same thing be done exactly the same way when the reverse happens? And maybe we shouldn't do any, or we should do as little of that as we possibly can. That doesn't mean we shouldn't take a look at these bigger structural issues, but we shouldn't cram it all together in one thing.
Yeah, that's a problem right there. See, that's a problem, because that means if we just reverse it, it doesn't have the same power, because we might. How can I say this? Remember, this side could be right, or this side could be right, or this side could be wrong. This side could be wrong. It's a black and white issue. It's not in the middle. I don't think so. I might be wrong. I don't think so. It's not. There is something that's really in the middle. No, because if the truth is one, that's it. You don't just play around by the truth. It could be a variables of connections. Those connections might be truth, right? And some connections might be unclarified, right? But to get to the point, there's one truth, and that truth might be that we have a problem in the minority communities, and it's okay to say it. And I might be wrong. This is just my opinion, right? And my personal experience, right? I don't want to get here in trouble. Just YouTube. I'm not here to just initiate anything. Just want to initiate a debate in my comment section. I might be wrong, but my time living in Brooklyn, in New York City, or even here in Milwaukee, it's the same problem. There's certain community that there's certain behaviors or cultures that promote certain things, and so for some reason we don't want to fix that problem. In a lot of these communities, they need that help. And I'm not talking about throwing money. We might have to step up the game a little bit and just fix these problems in another way rather than money.
It's not.
That's very well put, Jordan. That's exactly what I'm trying to say. You said it better than I did.
Well, I listened to you, so that was a big help.
By the way, if we do cram it all into one thing, God help us, because there are people, and they're not going to speak out. There are people who will see it, process it, just as I hope they would not do. Black thug murders innocent white girl, and harbor a resentment and nurse that resentment. Yeah. And that's a tinder box. That's a powder keg waiting to be lit. And we can dismiss it if we want to, but those people are not entirely wrong in their sentiment. They need to be disabused of that instinct, that instinct to conflate those levels of analysis.
Yeah. Well, that's part of the problem I have with ideology, is that's ideology is so low resolution. It does that conflation. It doesn't notice. And when you get educated, you start differentiating. It's like, and that's kind of what you said happened to you when you became more conservative, once you got more educated. It's like, this is, when I take this apart and see all the moving pieces, This is way more complex than my low resolution representation guided me to believe.
Low resolution meaning, it's a black kid murdering a white kid, or the white kid murdering the black kid. We're not going through the sort of the problem. It's like you have high blood pressure. Instead of just fixing your diet, here's a pill. The pill you just keep your high blood pressure down. Instead of fixing your diet, which is the main common denominator. What is it that causing the high blood pressure? Maybe the cigarette. Maybe you have to cut out the cigarette. Maybe you have to just, walk 4 miles a day. Drink more water. Things like that. That's fixing the problem. The pill will be to falsify or falsification or the placebo of fixing the problem, which is not fixed. Okay?
To begin with. And that's, I've experienced that many times in my life when I tried to take problems apart so they could be solved instead of just discussed, let's say. You have to make a high resolution model before you can get anywhere. That's true in clinical practice, and I think it's true in public policy. And partly what we're doing when we're educating people, if we're doing it right, is saying, hey, you've got a map of the world, but it's not very detailed. And when you really look at it, well, here's the complexity. Yeah. And that's what we're actually contending with. People don't like that because, well, it's complex, right? And you have the simple solution at hand to begin with, but the problem
I know where he's going, but
it isn't the right tool for the job. You got to make it high resolution. And that takes a lot of work.
Yeah. I guess when he's talking about high resolution, we might talking about some different. I don't want to talk about this topic because I might get those weird things in YouTube, right? I don't want to do that. But we need somehow to. I don't want to say fix. It's not fixing. It's not a tool, right? Fixing. We have to identify what is the reason why these problems are occurring in this community. And that might be a message or cultural. And I'm gonna go first with the cultural, because I think that's for those people that live in this community, right? There's a cultural difference with certain sectors, and some cultures do give some advantage for some people. It is what it is. That's how it is. If you live with 10 family, their culture is Christian and education, all these things, and sport and no drugs, there's a 95% chance that you might, of course, succeed in life. Now, the culture is thuggism, bad behaviors, broken homes, and gangster rap. You might have to see different outcome, right? Because it's your cultural influence. That's my take on this. I might be wrong again. Let me know in the comment section below, and I'm gonna really appreciate it.